I never thought a tiny USB drive could make a grown man sweat like that. But there he was, Oliver, my husband of 6 years, sitting across from me in the courtroom with beads of perspiration forming on his upper lip. His expensive navy suit suddenly looked too tight. His solicitor kept leaning over to whisper urgently in his ear, but Oliver wasn't listening. He was staring at the small object I'd just placed on the table between us, a snowflake. A delicate, crystalline USB drive that caught the fluorescent lights and threw tiny rainbows across the polished wood. I'd chosen it carefully. Something beautiful to hold. Something ugly. Judge Thornbury adjusted her glasses and leaned forward slightly. She was a woman in her late 50s with steel-grey hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen every type of human behavior imaginable. Nothing much surprised her anymore, but even she seemed curious about the snowflake sitting there, so innocent and small. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "You indicated you have evidence to present regarding the breakdown of your marriage?" I nodded. My hands were folded calmly in my lap, though my heart was hammering so hard I was certain everyone could hear it. I'd practiced this moment 100 times with Fiona. Stayed calm. Speak clearly. Don't let them see you shake. "Yes, Your Honour," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Everything is on this USB drive." Oliver's solicitor, a thin man named Geoffrey with a pointed nose and an expensive watch, raised one eyebrow. He glanced at Oliver, then back at me. "Your Honour, we weren't informed that Mrs. Ashford would be presenting digital evidence today." "I filed the appropriate notices," I replied quietly. I had. Fiona had made absolutely certain of that. Every form, every deadline, every legal requirement met perfectly. Judge Thornbury nodded. "The court received notification. Continue, Mrs. Ashford." I could feel eyes on me from the gallery. Camilla was sitting in the second row, her pearl necklace catching the light every time she shifted. She'd dressed for this like she was attending the opera burgundy suit. Perfectly styled blonde hair with just enough grey to look distinguished. Makeup applied with surgical precision. She'd probably expected to watch me crumble today. Expected me to accept whatever scraps Oliver's legal team offered and disappear quietly. The way people like me were supposed to. I met her eyes for just a moment. Her expression was confident, almost amused. She had no idea what was coming. "What exactly is on this storage device?" Judge Thornbury asked, picking up the snowflake USB and examining it. 6 years of evidence, Your Honour," I said. "Communications, financial records, photographs, audio recordings, everything that shows the true nature of my marriage and why it ended." That's when Oliver made a small noise in his throat. Not quite a cough, more like he'd swallowed something sharp. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. The man I'd married 8 years ago had kind eyes and a warm smile. He'd held my hand during scary films and brought me tea when I worked late. He'd kissed my mother's cheek and called her mum, even though his own mother hated it. That man was gone. Had been gone for years, really. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. The Oliver sitting across from me now had cold eyes and a tight mouth. His dark hair was styled with too much product. His tie cost more than my mum's monthly rent. Everything about him screamed money and privilege, and the absolute certainty that he was better than everyone else, especially better than me. "Your Honour," Geoffrey said, standing up quickly. "We'd like to request time to review this evidence before—" "The evidence speaks for itself," I interrupted. I never interrupted people. The old Claire would have apologised immediately. But I wasn't the old Claire anymore. Judge Thornbury looked at me with renewed interest. "Go on." I took a breath. This was it, the moment everything changed. "On that USB drive, you'll find over 300 messages between my husband and his mother, discussing me. How I don't fit into their family. How I'm an embarrassment to them. How my background, my working-class background, makes me unsuitable to be an Ashford." My voice didn't waver. "Fiona would be proud. You'll also find evidence of 3 separate affairs my husband conducted throughout our marriage. Financial records showing he systematically moved our marital assets into accounts controlled by his mother, preparing for this divorce. And audio recordings of private conversations where they discussed how to ensure I'd leave this marriage with nothing." The courtroom had gone very quiet. Oliver's face had progressed from pale to grey. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Jeffrey was frantically scribbling notes, probably calculating how much damage control would be needed. But it was Camilla's reaction that satisfied me most. Her confident smile had vanished. She sat frozen, her perfectly manicured hands clutching her handbag like it might save her. "These are serious allegations," Judge Thornbury said carefully. She was looking at Oliver now, not me. "Mr. Ashford?" Oliver opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Your Honor, This is... My wife has clearly taken private communications out of context. A marriage breakdown is emotional. People say things they don't mean. Did you say these things?" The judge asked simply. It's a yes or no question, Mr. Ashford." Oliver looked at Jeffrey desperately. The solicitor gave a tiny shake of his head. "Don't answer without counsel." I felt something shift inside me. For 6 years, I'd watched Oliver talk his way out of things, charm his way through problems, use his expensive education and family connections to smooth over any unpleasantness. He'd convinced me I was too sensitive when I complained about his mother's cruelty, too emotional when I questioned why he worked late so many nights, too insecure when I noticed how he looked at other women. But here, in this courtroom, he couldn't charm his way out. The evidence didn't care about his smile or his family name or his expensive suit. The evidence just was. "Your Honor," I said quietly. "There's more on that drive. Much more. Financial irregularities. Proof of systematic emotional abuse. Evidence that this divorce was planned and orchestrated to leave me destitute while my husband and his mother protected their assets." Oliver's hands were shaking now. Actually shaking. "Should I continue?" I asked, looking directly at him. His eyes met mine and I saw it real fear. Not the fear of losing money, though that was there too, but the fear of being exposed, of everyone seeing who he really was, beneath the polish and charm. Jeffrey stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Your Honor, we'd like to request an immediate recess. My client needs time to consult with me privately before..." "Request granted," Judge Thornbury said, but her eyes never left the Snowflake USB. "We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Everyone stood as the judge left. Oliver immediately turned to Jeffrey, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Camilla rushed over to them, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. I gathered my things slowly, carefully. Fiona had told me not to rush, not to look defeated or scared. "You hold all the cards now," she'd said. "Walk like you know it." So I did. I picked up my bag, smoothed my simple black dress, not designer, but clean and professional, and walked toward the courtroom doors. As I passed Oliver, he reached out as if to grab my arm, then thought better of it. "Claire," he hissed. "What are you doing? We can work this out." "You don't need to." I kept walking. Behind me, I heard Camilla's voice, sharp and panicked. Fix this right now." The courtroom doors closed behind me with a soft click. I stood in the corridor, my legs suddenly weak. I'd done it. Actually done it. The Snowflake USB was still sitting on the judge's desk, waiting to reveal every secret Oliver thought he'd buried. 30 minutes until the truth came out. I pressed my back against the cool wall and finally let myself smile. 8 years ago, I was standing in front of a canvas print of my own design work, trying not to fidget with the hem of my dress. The gallery was too fancy for me, all white walls and people holding wine glasses like they were precious objects. I'd only gotten the spot because my university tutor knew the organizer and had pushed hard for emerging artists to be included in the charity auction. Emerging artists was a nice way of saying, people who can't usually afford to be here. My section was in the corner, naturally. The main walls held paintings by established names, people whose work sold for thousands. My little corner had 3 prints of digital designs I'd created, priced at £50 each. Reasonable. Achievable. Not embarrassing. I was mentally calculating how quickly I could leave without seeming rude when he walked up. "These are brilliant," he said, and I thought he was talking to someone else. But when I turned, he was looking right at me, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of smile that made you want to smile back. He wore a grey suit that fit perfectly, and he held his wine glass like he'd been born doing it. "Thank you," I managed, certain he'd move on in a moment. He didn't. He leaned closer to examine the middle print, a design I'd done for a local cafe. All warm colours and hand-drawn elements mixed with digital precision. This one especially. There's something honest about it. Most design work tries too hard to be clever. This just is. I blinked. That's exactly what I was going for. "Oliver Ashford," he said, extending his hand. "Claire Hartley." His hand was warm, his grip firm but not aggressive. We talked for 20 minutes, then an hour. He asked real questions, not the polite small talk people usually did at these things, but genuine curiosity about my process, my influences, my goals. He listened when I answered. Actually listened. His eyes focused on my face, not drifting around the room looking for someone more important. When I mentioned I'd taught myself most of my digital skills because I couldn't afford the fancy courses, he didn't look uncomfortable. He just nodded and said, "The best artists I know are self-taught. Formal education can kill creativity if you're not careful." By the end of the night, he'd bought all 3 of my prints. Not for £50 each, he paid $300 for the set, insisting they were worth it. "That's too much," I protested. "It's not nearly enough," he replied. "But it's what I have on me. May I take you to dinner sometime? I'd love to hear more about your work." I should have known then. Should have questioned why someone like him, expensive suit, confident manner, the kind of accent that spoke of private schools and family money would be interested in someone like me. But I was 24. And he was looking at me like I mattered, so I said yes. Our first date was at a restaurant I'd never have chosen, the kind with cloth napkins and waiters who spoke in hushed tones. I wore my best dress and still felt underdressed. But Oliver didn't seem to notice. He asked about my childhood, my mum, what it was like growing up in a small flat in South London. I waited for the judgment. It never came. "My family has money," he said over dessert, speaking casually like it was no big thing. "But money doesn't make people interesting. You're interesting, Claire. You've built something from nothing. That takes real strength." I fell a little bit in love with him right there. The next 2 years were like living in a dream I was afraid to wake up from. Oliver took me to nice places. Yes. But he also came to my favourite cheap curry house in Brixton and declared it the best food he'd ever had. He met my mum in our tiny flat, sat on our worn sofa, drank tea from chipped mugs, and chatted with her about her job at the supermarket, like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. My mum loved him. "He's got kind eyes," she told me later. "And he looks at you proper, not through you." Oliver supported my work. When I had a tight deadline, he'd bring me food and sit quietly in the corner of my flat, reading, just keeping me company. When a client tried to underpay me, he helped me draft a professional email standing firm on my rates. "Know your worth," he said. "Don't let people take advantage of your kindness." He proposed on a Tuesday evening in February. No fancy restaurant, no public display. Just the 2 of us in my flat, after I'd finished a particularly difficult project. He got down on one knee beside my desk, ring box in hand, and said, "Claire, you make everything better. Marry me?" The ring was beautiful, simple, elegant, clearly expensive but not showy. It fit perfectly. I said yes before he'd even finished asking. Everything changed the night of the engagement party. Oliver's family estate was in Surrey, a massive property with manicured gardens and actual gravel driveways that crunched under car tyres. I'd known Oliver came from money, but seeing it was different. This wasn't just wealth. This was generations of wealth, the kind that built entire wings of houses and had portraits of ancestors on the walls. "Don't be nervous," Oliver said as we pulled up. "They'll love you." His mother, Camilla, met us at the door. She was beautiful in that preserved way wealthy women achieve, blonde hair perfectly coloured, skin smooth from expensive treatments, clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "So this is Claire," she said, looking me up and down in a way that felt like an assessment. "How lovely. Oliver has told us so much about you." The way she said "so much" made it sound like a warning. The party was full of people who knew each other, who spoke in reference points I didn't understand, who could trace their families back centuries. I wore the nicest dress. I owned a simple navy thing from the high street and felt like a child playing dress-up. Oliver's brother and sister-in-law were polite but distant, asking brief questions before moving on to other guests. Oliver kept getting pulled into conversations, leaving me standing alone by the canapé table, smiling at people who looked right through me. Camilla found me there. "So Oliver tells me you do computer work?" she said. "Computer work? The way someone might say, bin collection." "Graphic design," I corrected gently. "I'm a freelance designer." "How quaint. Very modern." She sipped her champagne. "Oliver has always been attracted to unique types. He went through a phase in university, dated quite an unusual girl. We were worried, but he grew out of it." The implication was clear. I was another phase. "I'm sure you'll be comfortable in our world," Camilla continued, her smile sharp. "It just takes some adjustment. Different expectations, you understand." I wanted to say something, to defend myself. But Oliver appeared then, slipping his arm around my waist. "Mum, stop monopolizing my fiancé," Camilla laughed. Light and musical. "Just getting to know her, darling. After all, she's joining the family." The way she said family sounded like a prison sentence. That night, driving home, I tried to tell Oliver about his mother's comments. "She's just protective," he said, eyes on the road. "She'll warm up, you'll see." But she never did. The wedding was 6 months later, a grand affair at the estate with 200 guests. My mum and my few friends sat near the back, while Camilla's circle filled the front rows. I'd wanted something smaller, more intimate, but Camilla insisted. "The Ashfords have standards to maintain," she'd said. I wore a dress Camilla chose. Walked down an aisle Camilla decorated, said vows in front of people I'd never met. Oliver kissed me at the altar, and everyone clapped, and for a moment, I felt like maybe everything would be fine. During the reception, I heard Camilla talking to a guest near the ladies' room. "She seems sweet enough," the guest said. "Oh, she's lovely," Camilla replied. "But she'll learn her place eventually. Oliver always comes back to family." I stood frozen outside the door, my wedding dress suddenly too tight. That was the beginning, the first crack in the foundation. I just didn't know the whole structure would eventually crumble. The first year of marriage, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Oliver still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still asked about my day when he came home, still reached for my hand when we walked down the street. These were the signs of a good marriage, weren't they? The small gestures that mattered. But there were other things too. Smaller, quieter, easy to dismiss if you didn't want to see them. Like how he started correcting my grammar at dinner parties. "Claire means fewer, not less," he'd say with a laugh, like it was charming. His colleagues would chuckle, and I'd smile because what else could I do? Or how he'd suggest I wear different clothes to his work events. Maybe the black dress instead. It's more sophisticated. The implication being that my choices weren't sophisticated enough. By year 2, the suggestions became more frequent. He sighed when I talked about my design projects. Not obviously just a small exhale, barely noticeable. But I noticed. I started talking about my work less. "How was your day?" I'd ask. He'd launch into detailed stories about cases and clients and office politics. I'd listen, asking questions, being supportive. Then he'd check his phone, stand up, say he had emails to finish. My turn never came. Year 3 was when the family dinners became unbearable. Every Sunday, we'd drive to the estate. Every Sunday, Camilla would seat me at the far end of the long mahogany table, away from the important conversations. Oliver would sit near his mother, discussing business matters and family decisions. I'd sit between Oliver's elderly aunt, who was hard of hearing, and his teenage nephew, who spent the entire meal on his phone. "Claire, dear, could you help in the kitchen?" Camilla would ask, though she had staff for that. I'd spend half the dinner preparing dishes I wouldn't be credited for, listening to Camilla's subtle criticisms through the serving hatch. "That's an interesting outfit choice. I suppose not everyone grew up learning proper table settings. Oliver's father used to say, you can always tell someone's background by their vowels." Oliver never defended me. When I brought it up in the car, he'd say I was being sensitive. "Mum doesn't mean anything by it, That's just how she talks. She doesn't talk to your sister-in-law that way. That's different. You're being paranoid, Claire. So I stopped mentioning it. Stopped complaining. Stopped expecting things to change. By year 4, I realized I was apologizing constantly for things that weren't my fault. Sorry the dinner was too salty. Sorry I was tired after working all day. Sorry I didn't understand the reference to some private school tradition. Sorry for existing in spaces where I apparently didn't belong. Oliver started working later. Much later. He'd text that he was staying at the office. Wouldn't be home until midnight. I'd wait up the first few times, thinking we could at least have a cup of tea together. But he'd come home exhausted. Irritable. Wanting only to sleep. Maybe we could have lunch this weekend, I suggested once. Just us. I've got that thing at the club with Mum, he said, not looking up from his phone. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway. He stopped inviting me to things. Stopped asking my opinion. Stopped seeing me, really. I became furniture in our expensive house, something he walked past every day without really noticing. Year 5. I found the first text message by accident. His phone buzzed during breakfast. He was in the shower. I glanced at the screen, just habit. Nothing suspicious, and saw a name I didn't recognize. Last night was wonderful. When can I see you again? My hands went cold. When Oliver came downstairs, I showed him. He barely blinked. That's from a colleague. We had a work dinner. She's thanking the group. It says, last night was wonderful and when can I see you again? That doesn't sound like a work dinner. Claire, he said my name. Like he was tired of me. Don't be ridiculous. You're reading something that isn't there. Then let me see the rest of the conversation. No, he snatched his phone. I'm not entertaining your paranoid fantasies. I have to go to work. He left. I stood in our kitchen, shaking, wondering if I was crazy. I started paying attention after that. Little things. Lipstick on his collar that wasn't my shade. Receipts for restaurants on nights he claimed to be working late. The way he showered immediately when he got home, before even saying hello. When I asked, he had explanations for everything. The lipstick was from a colleague's greeting kiss at a party. The restaurants were client dinners. The showers were because he felt grimy from the commute. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe this was just what marriage looked like after 5 years. Maybe I was the problem. Year 6 started with hope. New year, fresh start. I suggested we take a holiday together, just the two of us. Somewhere quiet where we could reconnect. I can't take time off right now, Oliver said. Big case coming up. What about a weekend? Just 2 days? Claire, why are you being so needy? We're married. We don't need to prove anything. So I focused on making our home nicer. I redecorated the sitting room, choosing colours I thought he'd like. When he came home and saw it, he frowned. It's very bright. I thought it might cheer the space up. Mum's decorator friend could have done something more tasteful. This looks like something from a catalogue. It was from a catalogue. Because I'd paid for it with my own money. Money I'd earned from the clients Oliver no longer asked about. Then came December. Christmas month. Usually stressful, but I decided to make it special. I'd create the perfect Christmas Eve dinner. Show Camilla that I could do this, that I belonged. I spent days planning the menu. All of Camilla's favourites, dishes she'd mentioned liking over the years. I bought the best ingredients I could afford. I decorated our house with fresh greenery and candles, making everything warm and inviting. Oliver barely noticed. Looks nice, he muttered, glancing around before returning to his laptop. December 24th arrived cold and bright. I'd been cooking since dawn. The house smelled of roasted meat and spices. The table was set with our wedding china. Everything was perfect. Oliver's family arrived at 7. Camilla swept in wearing burgundy silk, her critical eyes scanning the room immediately. How festive, she said, in a tone that suggested it wasn't. Oliver's brother and sister-in-law, his aunt, his 2 cousins, they all filed in, polite but distant. I took coats, offered drinks, tried to be the perfect hostess. Dinner began. I'd worked so hard on every dish, but the compliments were thin and mechanical. Very nice. Quite good. Nothing more. I tried to join the conversation. They were discussing some scandal involving a mutual friend. I asked a question just trying to participate, and Camilla spoke over me, directing her answer to Oliver's sister-in-law instead. It happened 3 more times. I'd start to speak, and someone would interrupt, redirecting the conversation away from me. It was like I wasn't there, like I was a ghost at my own dinner table. After the main course, I brought out dessert, a complicated chocolate torte I'd spent hours perfecting. Camilla took 1 bite and set down her fork. "Shop bought?" she asked sweetly. "No, I made it." "Oh, it tastes rather commercial." The table went quiet. Oliver said nothing. Just cut another piece of his own dessert, eyes on his plate. I started clearing dishes, needing something to do with my hands. In the kitchen, I stacked plates carefully, my hands trembling slightly. Through the doorway, I could hear their voices continuing without me. Then, Camilla's voice rose slightly, clear and carrying. "You really should have listened to me, darling." I pressed my back against the kitchen counter, holding the plates so tightly my knuckles went white. Camilla was still talking in the dining room, her voice floating through the doorway like poison in the air. "I told you she wasn't right for this family. But you wouldn't listen. You never listen when it comes to these things." Oliver murmured something I couldn't quite hear. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I should walk away, go upstairs, not listen to this, but my feet wouldn't move. "She tries, I suppose," Camilla continued. "But breeding will always show. Or, in her case, the lack of it. You can dress them up, teach them which fork to use, but they'll always be what they are underneath." Someone laughed. A small, uncomfortable sound, but still a laugh. I set the plates down carefully and walked toward the dining room. Not running, not storming, just walking, steady and quiet. When I reached the doorway, I stopped. They didn't notice me at first. Oliver was nodding at something his mother had said. His brother was refilling wine glasses. His sister-in-law was checking her phone. Then Oliver spoke, and his voice was clear. Too clear. Every word a knife. "You embarrass me, Mum was right. You were always below us." The world stopped. I must have made a sound because everyone turned to look at me. The plates I'd been holding weren't in my hands anymore. I'd set them down. When? I couldn't remember. Camilla's face showed no shame, no guilt. If anything, she looked satisfied, like she'd been waiting years to have this said out loud. She smiled at me. Actually smiled. "My son deserves someone classier." 6 years. 6 years of biting my tongue, of accepting small cruelties, of telling myself I was being too sensitive. 6 years of shrinking myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. My chest felt empty. Not broken, just hollow. Like someone had reached in and scooped out everything vital and left only air behind. Oliver was looking at me with irritation now. Not guilt, not regret. Irritation. As if I'd ruined his evening by having the audacity to overhear what they actually thought of me. "Claire," he started. I held up one hand. He stopped talking. I removed my apron slowly, folded it with careful precision, and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then I walked upstairs to our bedroom. Behind me, I heard murmured voices, then laughter. They'd moved on already. Of course they had. I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark. The bed we'd shared for 6 years. The bed where I'd cried quietly so many nights, careful not to wake him. The bed where I'd felt more alone than I ever had sleeping by myself. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out, stared at the screen for a long moment, then dialed. Fiona answered on the second ring. "Claire, you okay? Isn't it Christmas Eve dinner tonight? I need your help," I said quietly. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from very far away. "What happened?" "I need evidence. Everything. Every text, every email, every bank transfer, every lie. I need it documented so thoroughly that there's no way out." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you sure? Because once we start this, there's no going back." I thought about Oliver's face when he said those words. The casual cruelty. The complete lack of remorse. "I'm sure. I'll be there Boxing Day. We'll need a few days minimum. Can you hold on that long?" "Yes." "Claire, whatever happened tonight, you didn't deserve it. I ended the call before I could cry. Downstairs, I heard them leaving. Car doors slamming, engines starting, Oliver's voice calling goodbye. Then the front door closed and the house went quiet. He didn't come upstairs, not for hours. I heard him in the sitting room, television on, the clink of a glass, having a drink, relaxing after dinner with his family. I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. Around midnight, he finally came to bed. He moved around the room quietly, whether to avoid waking me or because he simply didn't care. I couldn't tell. He climbed into bed, turned away from me, and within minutes was breathing deeply, asleep, peaceful, unburdened. I stared at his back in the darkness and felt nothing. The next morning was Christmas. We opened presents like actors in a play. He gave me expensive perfume the brand Camilla wore. I gave him the first edition book I'd saved for months to buy. He glanced at it, said cheers, and set it aside. We ate breakfast in silence. He checked his phone constantly. I watched him and wondered how I'd ever loved him. "I'm going to the club later," he said, not looking up from his screen. "Mum's organised a Boxing Day lunch thing." "Of course she has." He finally looked at me. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. It means nothing." He studied my face for a moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe, or suspicion. But then his phone buzzed and he looked away, the moment gone. Fiona arrived on Boxing Day with 2 large bags and the kind of expression that meant business. Oliver had already left for his mother's lunch. He hadn't invited me. We both pretended not to notice. "Right," Fiona said, setting up her laptop on the dining room table. "Show me everything." His laptop, phone backups, bank statements, anything he's left lying around. We're going to document every single thing. It took 3 days. 3 long, exhausting days of digging through Oliver's digital life while he was at work, oblivious to what was happening in his own home. Fiona was brilliant. She knew exactly where to look, how to access password-protected accounts, how to recover deleted messages. What we found was worse than I'd imagined. Hundreds of messages between Oliver and Camilla, spanning years. Messages where they mocked my clothes, my accent, my family, my work. Messages where Camilla sent money with notes like, "For tolerating her this month," and "Compensation for your patience." 3 affairs. Not 1, 3. Women from his office, from his social circle. Women Camilla knew about. In one email, Camilla actually encouraged it. "The girl from litigation is much more suitable. Well-bred family. Her father is a high court judge." After a quiet divorce, naturally. They'd been planning this. Planning to discard me. They'd just been waiting for the right moment. We found texts between Oliver and his brother, calling me the charity case and Oliver's social experiment. Jokes about how long I'd last before I realised where I stood. Financial records showed Oliver had been moving money for 2 years, transferring assets into accounts under Camilla's name, hiding investments, preparing to divorce me and leave me with nothing. But the worst was the audio file. Fiona found it in a cloud backup, a recording from Oliver's phone from a family dinner I hadn't been invited to. He'd accidentally left his voice recorder on. In it, Camilla and Oliver discussed timing, how to handle the Claire situation, how to ensure I'd leave quietly without making a fuss. Oliver's voice, clear as day. "She'll be too humiliated to fight. She knows she never belonged." Camilla laughing. "I did warn you about marrying beneath yourself, but at least it's easy enough to fix. She'll slink back to whatever council estate she came from, and we can all forget this unfortunate chapter." God, Mum, I can't believe I wasted 6 years. Consider it a learning experience. Darling. Fiona looked at me when the recording ended. Her eyes were furious, but her voice was gentle. "Claire, this is more than enough. This is systematic abuse. Financial manipulation. Everything we need." I felt oddly calm. The hollowness in my chest had hardened into something else. Something cold and clear, and absolutely certain. "Put it all on a USB drive," I said. "Something memorable." Fiona searched online and found it a snowflake-shaped drive. Delicate, beautiful, perfect for holding ugly truths. "I'll organise everything by date," Fiona said. Financial documents, messages, audio files, evidence of affairs. All cross-referenced. This is airtight, Claire. They can't talk their way out of this. I filed for divorce on January 2nd. Oliver was surprised when the papers arrived, but not worried. Why would he be? I was nothing. I had nothing. His solicitor probably assured him it would be simple. The court date was set for late January. Oliver didn't prepare much. He had Jeffrey expensive, experienced, connected. What did he need to worry about? The night before the hearing, I sat in Fiona's flat. The Snowflake USB sat on the table between us. Catching the lamplight. Last chance to back out, Fiona said softly. Once you present this tomorrow, everything changes. His career, his reputation, his relationship with his family. It's nuclear, Claire. I picked up the USB. It was so light, barely weighed anything at all. He said I embarrassed him, I said quietly. He said I was always below them. He let his mother call me common and unsuitable and not good enough. For 6 years, he let me believe I was the problem. I closed my hand around the snowflake. Tomorrow, he learns what embarrassment really feels like. Fiona smiled. The recess ended exactly 30 minutes later. I walked back into the courtroom with my shoulders straight and my head high. Fiona squeezed my hand once before taking her seat in the gallery. Oliver looked worse than before. His face had gone from grey to pale green, and there were sweat stains under the arms of his expensive suit. Jeffrey was whispering urgently in his ear, but Oliver kept shaking his head, his eyes fixed on the Snowflake USB still sitting on the judge's desk. Camilla had moved to sit directly behind her son. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the tight set of her mouth, or the way her hands clutched her handbag like it might escape. Judge Thornbury entered and we all stood. When we sat again, the room felt different, heavier, like the air itself knew something important was about to happen. Mrs. Ashford, the judge said, looking directly at me. Please continue. I took a breath and began. Your Honor, on that USB drive you'll find 6 years of documented emotional abuse. 347 messages between my husband and his mother, discussing me in degrading terms. They call me common. Beneath them, an embarrassment. His mother refers to me as the charity case and Oliver's unfortunate mistake. Oliver shifted in his seat. Jeffrey tried to interrupt, but Judge Thornbury held up one hand. You'll have your turn, Mr. Patterson. Mrs. Ashford, go on. There are also financial records showing my husband systematically transferred marital assets into accounts controlled by his mother over the past 2 years. A total of £83,000. Money from the sale of property we owned jointly. Money from investments in both our names. All moved without my knowledge or consent. Jeffrey scribbled notes furiously. Camilla's face had gone rigid. The USB also contains evidence of 3 separate affairs my husband conducted throughout our marriage. Emails, text messages, hotel receipts. The affairs were not only known to his mother, but actively encouraged by her. There's an email where she suggests he pursue a colleague because her family background is more suitable. Your Honor, this is... Jeffrey started. Is any of this untrue, Mr. Patterson? The judge asked sharply. Jeffrey looked at Oliver. Oliver looked at the table. I thought not. Continue, Mrs. Ashford. My voice was steady now. Stronger. There are also recordings, Your Honor. Conversations where my husband and his family discuss their plans to divorce me while ensuring I receive as little as possible. In one recording, my husband states, and I quote, "She'll be too humiliated to fight. She knows she never belonged." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, staring at me with wide eyes. Would you like to hear the recording, Your Honor? I asked. Yes, Judge Thornbury said immediately. Yes, I would. Fiona had prepared for this. She'd loaded key recordings onto her tablet, fully authorized and time-stamped. She brought it forward now, setting it up so the whole courtroom could hear. Oliver's voice filled the room. Clear. Unmistakable. She'll be too humiliated to fight. She knows she never belonged. Then, Camilla's laugh. Her voice. I did warn you about marrying beneath yourself, but at least it's easy enough to fix. She'll slink back to whatever council estate she came from, and we can all forget this unfortunate chapter. Oliver again. God, Mum, I can't believe I wasted 6 years. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Thornbury's expression had transformed from professional interest to cold fury. She looked at Oliver like he was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. Mr. Ashford, she said, her voice like ice. Stand up. Oliver stood shakily. He looked like he might be sick. Is that your voice on that recording? Your Honour. If I could explain the context. Yes or no, Mr. Ashford. A long pause. Then barely audible. Yes. Were you having multiple affairs throughout your 6-year marriage? Geoffrey touched Oliver's arm, but Oliver shook him off. What was the point in lying now? The evidence was all there, time-stamped and documented and undeniable. Yes. Did you transfer marital assets into your mother's accounts to hide them from your wife? Another pause. Yes. Judge Thornbury sat back in her chair. Mr. Patterson, does your client have anything to say in his defence? Anything at all that might explain this level of calculated cruelty? Geoffrey stood. He was a good solicitor, expensive for a reason. He tried. He talked about the stress of a breaking marriage, about how people say things they don't mean in private, about how financial arrangements were simply prudent planning, but his heart wasn't in it. Even he could hear how hollow the words sounded. Judge Thornbury let him finish, then turned back to Oliver. Mr. Ashford, I have presided over family court for 23 years. I have seen marriages end for every reason imaginable. But the systematic emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and sheer contempt displayed in this evidence is remarkable. She opened a file, made several notes, then looked up. My ruling is as follows. Mrs. Ashford will receive 60% of all marital assets, including those transferred to accounts under Mrs. Camilla Ashford's name. Those assets will be returned within 30 days, or I will hold Mrs. Camilla Ashford in contempt of court. Camilla made a strangled noise. Mr. Oliver Ashford will pay spousal support of £3,000 per month for a period of 3 years, given his substantial earning capacity and Mrs. Ashford's need to rebuild her career after years of undermining. Geoffrey was writing frantically, but he'd stopped objecting. There was no point. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am referring the financial irregularities documented in this case to the Solicitors Regulation Authority. Moving assets to avoid divorce settlements may constitute fraud, and as an officer of the court, Mr. Ashford should have known better. Oliver's face went white. His career. She was threatening his career. Your Honour, please, he started. Sit down, Mr. Ashford. He sat. As for the emotional abuse documented here, while I cannot undo the damage inflicted, I can ensure it's part of the permanent record. Should Mr. Ashford remarry, any future spouse will have access to these proceedings. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. This court is adjourned. Oliver stood abruptly, knocking his chair backwards. This is ridiculous. She's nothing. She came from nothing. The entire courtroom turned to stare at him. Judge Thornbury's expression could have frozen fire. Mr. Ashford, sit down before I add contempt charges to your growing list of problems. He sat, but his face was red now, furious and humiliated. Good. Let him feel it. Let him understand what humiliation actually meant. Judge Thornbury gathered her papers, but before leaving, she looked directly at me. Mrs. Ashford, I wish you every success in your future. Based on the evidence presented here, you've shown remarkable strength and dignity in impossible circumstances. I hope you use your freedom well. Thank you, Your Honour, I said quietly. She nodded and left. The moment the door closed behind her, chaos erupted. Oliver spun to face me, fury in his eyes, but Geoffrey grabbed his arm, hissing warnings about making things worse. Camilla rushed over, her careful composure shattered, demanding to know how I dared, how I could possibly. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I picked up my bag and walked out, Fiona right beside me. In the corridor, I finally let myself breathe. Really breathe. Deep and full and free. You did it, Fiona said, grinning. Claire, You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. Behind us, I heard raised voices. Oliver and Camilla arguing, Jeffrey trying to calm them down, the sound of everything falling apart. I walked toward the exit, toward the winter sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows, toward whatever came next. I felt lighter than I had in 6 years. 3 months passed like waking up from a long, bad dream. I moved into a small flat in Brixton, not far from where I'd grown up. It had big windows and creaky floors and absolutely no memories of Oliver in any corner. I painted the walls bright colours, yellows and blues that Camilla would have hated. I hung my own artwork. I bought second-hand furniture that I actually liked. My design business slowly came back to life. Clients I'd neglected during my marriage reached out. New ones found me through referrals. My calendar filled up with work I cared about, projects that excited me, people who respected my skills.